All right. Well, let's get going, huh? Morning, everybody. Uh, Thank you so much for joining us on Monday morning, first thing, huh? At least we waited a little bit, 8:30, so that way you can get in, check an email or two, and get your coffee and whatnot there. And anyway, let's get rolling, huh? So, I'm Kevin Clausen, and in fact, I looked over the list of attendees, and many of you I've already had the wonderful opportunity of working with in the past. And it's always kind of fun to do this. And after the fact, I end up getting a ton of emails, and it's always kind of neat to reconnect with everybody. If you haven't met me before, I've been with the company forever. Surprisingly, time goes, doesn't it? It'll be 20 years come September. So it still blows my mind, but still going strong, hopefully. And and main focus now is more custom training. I work with I manage our AEs here at TopCon Solutions. I also do a lot of the more custom workflows and Civil 3D styles templates. In fact, we got a few of them on deck that my crack staff is going to be working with me anyway. And we'll go ahead and get rolling into this thing. Now, I set this up a little different. This whole Jumpstart series concept. And I want to give a little background and some expectations on what we're going to be trying to achieve today. And right off the bat, like why this Jumpstart series? And the main thing is, time is money, right? And a lot of folks that I speak with, they just don't have the time to sit in a class, for 2, 3 days, whatever it may be, and they're really just trying to get some core, settings in place to I don't know, just make Civil 3D more usable and repeatable. That's really the key. And another part of this too is with this new strange world that we're working in, many of us are working from home, and a lot of folks are, they're still staying busy, but they may have a little extra time here and there to, get a few things in place for when they do finally get a chance to get back in the office. So what we're going to be talking about today is, I think I named this one something to the effect of under the hood, sort of key settings and whatnot. Now, I wanted to kind of maybe preface before we got too deep into all of this that one size truly doesn't fit all when it comes to styles and templates and everything that falls under that category. Um, Realistically, I've gone everywhere and worked with tons and tons of different folks, and I'll see that sometimes I'll have a process or two that I've picked up from folks or whatever, and I'll show it off, but it may just not work for them for whatever reason. Um, they may do an extra step or two, but it makes more sense to them, so they prefer that. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out up front. I'm going to be providing you with different information here after the fact, and we may have to have a couple of tweaks here and there to make it exactly how you want this to work for you. Okay, so I'll throw that out there. Now, in saying that, uh, um, I would love to say that these are all my ideas, but it's truthfully what I've learned from you. Just 20 years of doing this, firm to firm, agency to agency. These little techniques I'm going to show, I maybe I could put it in air quotes there, sort of best practices. But again, after the fact, if you need to get a hold of me, please do. I'll make sure we have all that information up, and we can kind of further refine information. I can even help you out with templates. That's another discussion there, but don't worry. We won't leave you hanging here. So another little expectation deliverable. So following the webcast here, you're going to receive a couple of things. You're going to receive a drawing with all of the discussed topics today, and that drawing will have those settings. And then I'll also provide the style documentation of a white paper I wrote up a while back, and it just kind of talks about all the different ways we can set a style up. And again, one size doesn't fit all. That's why I wanted to make sure I gave this documentation. Is you can kind of figure out what works best for you. Okay. And now, if you want to expedite this, we'll follow this up with an email to everybody. But if you do want to expedite this and get that template in your hand so you can start banging away on it right off the bat, feel free to send me an email. It's you can see it there, kclawson@topconsolutions.com. And if you would, in the subject line, just put Jumpstart 1, and I'll follow up and send it right out. In fact, I can get it to you today if you need it. If you're tied up, don't worry about it. Again, we'll follow up with sending this information to all the attendees that make it out today. So this is the first session of 3, and I know some people are going to be in and out of different sessions, so I'd love to have you all. I think the next one's next week, and we'll go from there. So today's agenda, what are we going to be talking about? Well, I chose, for the record here, I chose 2020 for the platform here. I got 21, I have everything here. But I'm starting to see more and more folks are at least running 18 through 21. So I just chose this one because not everybody's already made it up to 21 yet. You're really not going to see much difference in what we're talking about as far as the key settings that we'll be reviewing today. So kind of going through this, and I've shown this enough throughout the years, many different classes everywhere else, but for some of you, this may just be a simple reminder, but I wanted to bounce in and show a couple real simple interface settings, basically, or as I said, they're simplistic customization. It's the quick access toolbar that's a really neat little item. If you're not using it, I'd highly recommend it, and I'll throw a couple of extra pieces in here and there. And then I have to say, forgive me here. So we kind of have a point of reference. I want to talk about like template theory a little bit. So basically, the usability. How's this thing? How it gets used? What I'm talking about with these best practices, and going in when I'm actually building templates for folks. Going in, I try to look at it with this holistic approach, and many of you have probably heard me say this. Anybody, myself included, anybody can get something in Civil 3D, build a surface, alignments, points, whatever it may be. But making it look correct from layout to layout or viewport to viewport, that's kind of the art, right? There's nuances of where these settings are. And give you kind of a quick example of what I'm talking about. I've seen this quite a bit where you may have things locked down via style, like the actual style itself is dictating exactly what needs to be shown in a drawing. So when you may go locate that entity and currently it's blue, and you find its appropriate layer and you change the layer to yellow, and then you get out of the layer dialog box and it's still blue. So that's because a style, it's a hierarchy concept. The style is dictating how that's, being shown. And that's a good thing, but that holistic approach, sometimes it can be frustrating because it's sort of locked down, okay? And I'll give examples of that as we go along. Now, obviously today we're talking more on the survey side of things here. So I wanted to go through key point settings. And what we'll be looking at is like key settings within point objects, layers, how things are displayed, possibly sizing, whatever it may be. And if there is questions along the way, go ahead and fire away. I got a backup here, and they'll be answering questions as we go. And then working with those point objects is the description key set. And what dictates what layers things go to, okay? And then finally is the point group manipulation. Now, point groups, I love them. We've been using them for years. I go back to Softask and just a skosh before that, actually, as much as I hate to say it. But throughout the years with Land Desktop, we've always used point groups. But where they differ a bit within Civil 3D is point groups give us the ability to not only organize our drawing and create surfaces from point groups, but they also give us the ability to manipulate visually how we want those points to look. And I'll show some examples of it as we go. The adopting Civil 3D, as far as adopting Civil 3D, surveyors have traditionally kind of held off a bit because points were sort of convoluted, and they are, I'll be honest, but the reason why is because we have so much more power than we've ever had, and we can display things, tons of different directions. So that can be a frustration. Now, I'm more and more, as I, work with folks, I see that, Civil 3D is a very mature product. It's been out for quite a long time. So I'm not seeing as much where people are struggling with that, but but you'll see here, and I'll point out, I guess where I'm kind of going with it is, oh gosh, you bring in a bunch of points, you have your description key file set up, you see your blocks, everything else, and at the end of the day, you want to plot this thing out, and you just want to see the symbols, the trees, the catch basins, hydrants, on and on and on. And then, a lot of folks will just go to their layers, freeze their layers, and then of course the entire point shuts off. All right. So I want to just kind of show little techniques on where we control that all via point groups. And the bottom line is when I'm trying to create in all of this is a repeatable process for everyone. If these, and they should be in your styles template from the beginning. So if you open up a whole new drawing or a brand new project from your template, all of these settings will be in place. Okay, and that's the idea. So speaking of repeatable processes there. Now, toward the end here, what I'll show off a couple little things. Uh, Obviously saving back to a template, how do we get that information that we create saved back? And it's super, super easy. There's a few different ways to do it, but just a simple drag and drop process is probably the easiest. As a project matures, you may create a style or two that you really like. And believe it or not, I see this all the time where somebody will do that. They'll create a handful of styles for, said project. And then as they get into a new project, they'll go, gosh darn it, what drawing was that I was working in? And they'll go find that drawing and they'll, open it up and clear everything out of it and then start with basically building on an old drawing. They'll just erase everything and build on it. But that creates a whole another set of problems there, or it could anyway. Um, it, Remember, the software keeps track of everything you do. So if you, in fact, do who knows, this project goes on forever, and then you just open up that drawing, well, all of those previous steps are recorded in there, and that ends up lending itself to, corruption and everything else. So the idea is we want to get the information clean back into your template right from the start. Okay. And then in a tool that doesn't get used very much, but it's been around forever, and it's called Design Center, and I'll show you where that's at. And if anybody has to be taking notes and they're unfamiliar with this tool called Design Center, write that down for sure. I use it all the time, especially when it comes to the creation of like the initial steps within templates. And the Design Center, when we look at it, it does a lot of different things, but it's really a core AutoCAD part of the program. So it's for like stealing layers or blocks, or for that matter, if you have layouts created or set up, we can just drag and drop them into our current drawing, and it's incredibly easy to use. If you haven't used it before, you'll see me do it a time or two here, and there's nothing to it. Very, very simple. And then finally, we'll finish up. I just want to kind of poke around with you a little bit within the template that I'm going to send out to you. It's a drawing, it won't be a template, but you could simply open it up and do a save as if you wanted to. But I just wanted to sort of show the core pieces in it that we talked about today. And the idea is I really want to get everybody feeling confident when they have this in hand that they can reproduce this. And when I say one size doesn't fit all, I'm not pretending that I'll send you this template or this drawing and that's your new template. You'll have those settings so you could reverse engineer these into your environment, okay? Whatever the pieces are that you may or may not have liked, okay? So you can kind of pick and choose as far as that goes, okay? So let's jump over to the program here. And I'll make sure later that I pop up my my email just in case you didn't get a chance to write that down. Okay, so starting from the beginning here, and like I said, I was talking about. Well, we'll start with the interface setup, as I said, and then we'll get into a little bit of the template theory and whatnot. But I've shown this quite a bit, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But surprisingly, I travel all over and see different things, and it's the little things in life that make everybody happy, right? And I'll often show these complicated intersection designs, whatever, and nobody cares, but I'll show a few things with this tool at the top here that's called the quick access toolbar. And it's so simplistic, and they're like, oh, and they like that. It's just a quick, easy. Now, one thing about this part is the drawing that I send you, this is actually saved in your, the little settings I'm going to show you here in just a moment. This is in your profile or your workspace. So this won't be in a drawing. This is just your personal environment, okay? So whatever you change up in here, you just want to make, I'll show another setting here. It's called workspace settings. You just want to make sure it retains those settings as we go, okay? So maybe I'll just crack open a drawing. I have a few of them open, but I'm going to grab something a little different here. I think I'll grab this one for now, just so we have some line work to play with, whatever. Okay, so again, we're going to talk about this toolbar right here. It's called the quick access toolbar. All right. Prior to that, though, a couple little things. If some of the users that are viewing today are a little bit new with the program, you'll see over on the left-hand side, I dropped that down where that big letter C. That's the application menu. A release or two ago, that was an A, and they switched it back to the letter C. They prefer consonants, I guess. Makes more sense, so it is civil. It's not just AutoCAD. And anyway, if I drop it down, one thing I always like to show when I get an opportunity like this to show off, presets or just usability of the program. This has been cannibalized from the old school file menu drop down that we've known for those of you that have been using the program. It's been around forever, and a lot of the same settings are in the file menu drop down, and that's talking about like plotting or save, open, whatever it may be. And of course, there's our list of previously or last open drawing, that kind of thing. But one I like to show is this very top one here. It says search commands here, that field. It's due to its proximity, most folks think that it's a search field for like a drawing, but it's not. It's actually a search for any command within the program. And I use it quite a bit, and I thought I'd just kind of goofing off here with, I don't know, whatever you want to pick here, but you can start typing in a command and it'll actually do a autocomplete. So I don't know, maybe we were talking design center. So if I start typing in design, and you look there, it starts doing a list. Again, that like an autocomplete, like the command line would do. And lo and behold, there's Design Center. And so it does a couple things for me. One, and it's a little tough to see, but in that light gray, it tells you exactly where that command is at. But the second part is I can just simply click on it directly from there, and it'll fire it right up on my screen. So there's Design Center. I'm just tipping my cards here. We'll look at this thing later. But whatever that command may be, you're trying to, I don't know, import points or something like that. So you just start typing in import. And as soon as I go to points, lo and behold, there's import points. So you can just direct access those commands. So kind of a nice little spot. Anyway, no big deal. I just thought I might hit that in passing. Okay, so now what we're looking at is this one here. This is the quick access toolbar. And we use it all the time. I mean, that's where we open up a new drawing, save, whatever it may be, the undo's up there, print, however you have it set up. But one thing I like to show with this thing is it's easily customizable. In fact, I think next week, might be this week, I'll be working with somebody that had some old customizations, and we're going to decide whether or not that they really want to migrate those customizations forward because of this slick little toolbar is so easy to customize. And the second part is our ribbon, as you know, is content sensitive. So if you pick something, it serves up, your next move. And what I mean by that is if I click on that surface there, it takes a second there, but you'll see that there's all of the next moves. The software, it behaves like a Word. You pick on an image, you'll see that there's a format for the image, or you pick on a piece of text or whatever it may be, a table, and it changes around to the data associated to that. So I say all that because I'm not seeing as much customization as I used to. Okay, and for those of you that do have a lot of customization, you know that sometimes bringing it forward or migrating it forward can create various little scenarios that you end up having to repath things, what have you. So this little number, the quick access toolbar, I was going to show a couple things with it. One, just simple customization. And in here today, obviously, we're talking a little bit more about survey related information here. So if I just needed, who knows, if I needed something, a couple examples, if I needed a bearing and a distance or information on an arc or something like that, okay, well, if you're using the ribbon, that's where you would figure out, well, okay, because I'm trying to analyze something, you'd switch like to the Analyze tab, and then you would slide over here, and you'll see there's line arc information. Well, okay, great, and you'd pick it, and it works fine. But with this quick access toolbar, you can find any command that you need, and you can right-click on it, and I can simply, the first option is add to the quick access toolbar, and it throws it right onto that toolbar. So, and I'll show you where we can make that stick too. If I were to shut it down and come back in, or I were to crash or switch what they call workspaces, you may lose those settings. So there is a key setting in all of this. So in fact, I'll point that out now, might as well. This is our, if I drop that down, this is our different workspaces. And looking through those, these are just default. There's 4 of them. Civil 3D, which is pretty much what we're always working in. Drafting and analysis is the AutoCAD portion, 2D AutoCAD. 3D modeling is three-dimensional AutoCAD, a little different drafting, more like parts, say on an engine or something like that. And then planning and analysis, that's the map portion, so the GIS portion, Map 3D, that comes with Civil 3D, okay? Now those are our, again, workspaces. Now I started here because this quick access toolbar, there's only so much real estate when it comes to working with that thing. And you can see that, right, lo and behold, there, this great big, it's not huge, but it's sizable, that's taking up that much space. This is a redundant setting. This is also, if I just take my cursor down, if you're following along here, there's this little, looks like a gear or a bicycle sprocket, something like that. That's the exact same setting down there. And if I click on it, you'll see that you just put the checkbox by any one of those same workspaces. But where I wanted to go first is a one-time setting. It's called workspace settings. So whatever we were to do to our interface, not just with the quick access toolbar, but anywhere, if you had toolbars that you wanted to pull up, like AutoCAD toolbars, whatever it may be, if I click on that workspace settings, I've already got mine switched over. By default, when you install the program, it's always set to do not save changes to the workspace. So therefore, again, if I shut down and I come back in, it defaults back to, out of the box settings. It's a one-time deal. You want to toggle that on, and that way, whatever we do, it'll retain our changes or our edits. Also, and I kind of mentioned this, but if I didn't have that set to automatically save, if I switched my workspace over to map or what do they call it, planning and analysis, when I came back to this, I would lose those settings, and that is by design. It's just a one-time deal that you have to make sure you have that toggled on. Okay. Now mine is on. Now a couple other things that I kind of like to do is, some of these are just AutoCAD lines. If I pick, say, any one of these lines here, and if I select that, and if I happen to be on the Home tab, very common. Different ways to get around this, but you could have your properties dialog box turned on maybe your second monitor or something like that, and any entity that you would click on, it would show up in that properties dialog box, and maybe who knows, we're just trying to figure out what layer we're on or whatever it is. Well, that again, that's an AutoCAD line. So if I look, it didn't change anything. That content sensitive ribbon that I was talking about earlier, that didn't change. Because it's AutoCAD, nothing changes. However, it did show me up in my on my ribbon here which one that I had selected. So if I were to hit escape, now if I were to pick, say, one of these Civil 3D points, and maybe I have different types of trees in there, Doug firs, cedars, on and on and on. And I just wasn't sure. Maybe my blocks aren't or showing me right off the bat and saying, oh, they're just not set, or they all look the same, whatever it is. But if I pick that Civil 3D point, because it's a point, everything switches around, and I don't have that immediate tool to find out what layer it's on. Now, not the end of the world. I mean, if your properties was up, or for that matter, you just hit your home tab, you can figure out what it is, then you switch back to your points so you can make edits, or whatever it is. So where I'm going with all this is this quick access toolbar up top here. I think they added this in AutoCAD too, where it's one of the immediate options, just raw AutoCAD. But I like to run that up top here. So this quick access toolbar, it's darn near bulletproof. I'm going to get rid of that last, or this one up top here. I just set it back to default settings, and if I right click on it, I can remove that from the quick access toolbar. And then if I wanted to put my layers up top there, so just emulating right here, it's nothing more than just like we did with that other command with the bearing and distance there. If I right click on it, I can just say add it to the quick access toolbar, and it's pops up perfect. Now, that may not seem like that big a deal, especially in early stages of a drawing where you may have a lot of AutoCAD line work. But later, when almost everything becomes a Civil 3D entity, or via styles and the intelligent objects, whatever it is that you pick, if I just grab one of those points again, you'll see that again my ribbon changes and it tells me exactly what layer that tree was on. So it's kind of like having the best of all worlds. And in fact, I use it all the time. You can still drop it down, switch that entity from its current layer to a different layer, or whatever it is, just a little informational thing. So maybe a couple other quick things with this is just to be thorough with it. If I drop down that far right arrow, little arrow is pointing to the south there. If I drop that down, you'll see that there's workspace, so I could always turn this back on if I wanted it up there rather than the little gear thing down here. But there's a few other little quick settings I want to maybe show off. One in particular, if you're newer to the program, or for that matter, maybe you just don't get a chance to touch it day in and day out. Toward the bottom here, the second one from the bottom, this is where it says currently, because mine's not on, it says, actually mine is too on, I forgot to turn that off, sorry. Mine says hide menu bar. By default, it'll look like this, where I'm just seeing a ribbon, okay? But if I drop that little arrow down, this is what I was suggesting here, is you'd want that, if you wanted those drop downs, you could say show the menu bar. And there we go, you can see the file, edit, view, and so forth. Now, the reason why I show that is, like I said, for those of you that just don't touch it day in and day out, I think it gives you a really good working relationship with the program. You don't have to jump to ribbon to know where everything's at all the time. Example would be if I'm just trying to simply insert points, well, I have to know that I got to go to my ribbon, and then there's points from a file. And a couple different ways to do it too. You can use the survey database, and that's a whole nother ball of wax. We'll be doing that next session there. But that's very doable. Okay. Where was I going with that? Home tab. Oh, here we are. So that is a method. However, if I wanted to, and I was talking about that working relationship across the top there, I know it has something to do with points, so there's points. I could drop that down and there's import, export, or for that matter, creating points or whatever it is. And you get the idea here. Building a surface, there's several different ways to do it, but you could just simply go right to this one here, surfaces, there's create surface and so forth. Now, just for real estate purposes, I'm gonna turn mine off. So I just would go back down and say hide that menu bar. So that just, swallows it back up and gives us a little bit more drafting area. But for many, they love that because it reminds them of the way we used to use CAD for years and years, as opposed to this ribbon. Just kind of makes the process easier for some. And there is a couple of gems in there too that you may not find on the ribbon that I periodically use, reversing alignments and different things like that. It just makes it a little bit easier to find immediately. Parcels, there's a couple in there that you may not see readily on the ribbon, and you have to kind of dig for it. So just nice and simple. Now, if this is something that you like, one last thing in here is if I drop that same arrow down, you'll see that there's the third option from the bottom is more commands. And if I pick that for a second, this is every command within the program, whether you'll see there in that second column there, whether it's civil, AutoCAD, map related, there's planning and analysis and so forth. And I'm just going to randomly grab something. But any one of these, fortunately they are organized alphabetically, so you can go pick those and in fact, I'll just do it here. I'm going to randomly grab something here. Here's 3D Polyline. I wouldn't grab this one, but just since I'm looking at it here, what you do is you click and hold with your left mouse button, and I'm keeping my finger on that button, on the left mouse button there, and you can see how it's got like the cursor looks kind of funky. It's got like a little box with a plus, and I can actually take that and place that anywhere I want. So maybe I'll put it right here for whatever reason. And you'll see now that by dragging that up, there it is, and it will stay there until I, in fact, either get rid of it or if I didn't have my workspace settings next time I came in, that would disappear. So who knows, maybe you have a job that you're doing areas and you might find that area button and drag it onto that, and just that day you're doing a lot of different areas, so it might be nice to have it readily available. And then now, when you already saw me do this, but if I don't want that, I'll discard that. If I don't want that, I can just right click on it and remove it from the quick access toolbar. And I don't know, I think I made reference to this earlier here, is it really is bulletproof. Customization throughout the years, and I still run into it periodically, where you'll come in one day and all of your toolbars or whatever they are, years ago it was smiley faces, and then it became question marks, and you have to end up loading like I think it's one of the MNU files or whatever it is. You have to repath a few things and possibly the little pictures and everything else to get that information back. This thing, yeah, you can add, remove, whatever it may be all the time. So I'll dump that one. Now, lastly with it, I was talking about some of the settings that, well, actually maybe I'll just pull it up here. Yeah, I'll do it this way. So lastly is if I mentioned that there's only so much real estate on this thing, and this might be a different class, but if nothing else, I just want to show it off. You actually can create your own custom drop downs. I've done that before within, and there's some good white papers out there. If that's something of interest, let me know and I can dig up those white papers. And I can just quickly show you here, whatever it may be on the home tab here. These are all of the different AutoCAD lines. So different ways to create lines, 3D, whatever they are, you can see the list there, but great big long drop down list. Now I'm just going to use that one as a default. I'd never add this one, but I think it shows where, or conveys what I'm trying to get across here. By simply clicking on it and say add to the quick access toolbar, there's that drop down list. And if I click on it, they're all there regardless of what workspace I'm in or whatever it is. They'll always be right there. So like I said, I've gone in and in the past I've set some default survey stuff up, like importing points or just whatever the commands were that folks didn't want to have to jump back and forth between different tabs on the ribbon to get to, and you can put compile whatever you want in that list, and that helps with additional real estate, so whatever it may be. And like I say, at the end I can just simply remove the quick access toolbar and poof, it's gone. But I will leave up that layer thing. That's one of probably my favorite things in the last 10 years that they've allowed us to do. It's quite useful. Okay, so moving in to tasks at hand here. I'm going to get rid of that drawing for now. And I even said, forgive me here, I want to talk a little bit about template theory. And what I mean by that just basically is, how do we want to run it? How do there's infinite ways that you can set your template up and behave with your day-to-day drafting or your outputs, whatever it may be. But I'm contacted all the time to take a look at it, possibly overhaul a template, build it from scratch, whatever it is. And I thought, as sort of a point of reference, that we would backtrack a little bit, and I'll kind of give you a feel for what I look for. And there's a couple of key settings that I look for, and that's what today is about, is you know analyzing what you have currently and then making these changes. Uh, I prefer to run the template very, what's that saying, lean and mean. I don't want a ton of layers. I really like automation. So if I go to create an entity, that's when the layers get created, and I'll show some examples of that. And it really, to me, it streamlines the process. And then the settings within those styles also allow us to that holistic flexibility that I was talking about, where viewport to viewport, and that's all of these. That's what we're talking about today. And I don't want to make any of this complicated by any means. None of this, I say it all the time. None of this is rocket science. It's just there's a repetitive process to it. But just kind of knowing what you're looking for and how you want to run it, that's key. Uh, um, Forgive me for being long-winded here, but I get this a lot, where I'm building templates for folks and they're just not sure what they want. And that makes it difficult on both ends, because I'm asking all these complicated, granular questions, and they're not sure. So part of this today is understanding where these settings are, but also it may kind of prompt you to rethink how you're doing some of these things, and help you with that process of, or that decision making process. How do we want to run this thing? So what I did on this, and like I said, Monday morning bright and early, right? And I got you looking at templates here. When I'm sent a template, there's a few key things, drawings or templates, whatever it may be. There's a few key settings that I look for. And what I did prior to our meeting this morning, I set up 3 different drawings. So one is, and I named one AutoCAD, which is a common, what that one is it's just, I created a new drawing from the old school acad.dwt. Sometime or another, we've all used it. And traditionally, a template to start a drawing, the DWT, that just had AutoCAD settings. So it had plot information, layers, that kind of thing, and they still do. But with Civil 3D, not only does it have all that information, but it also has all of our styles stored in it, how we actually can see things visually. Okay, so the first thing I do is I'll open up somebody's drawing, I'll run a recover and all that kind of stuff, and the one that I picked, the acad.dwt. This one's sort of emulating, and it happens a lot. I'll be on early discussions on a call and kind of get a little feel for it, and it's just that old adage, we just don't know what we don't know. So I'll be talking to some folks saying, well, you do have a template in place, and oh yeah, it's a great template, and we've had it for years, and the more questions I ask and the more I dig down, they did have that template for years, but in this case, it's one of those scenarios where it was just pulled forward, and it's truly an AutoCAD template, like it was an old land desktop template possibly, and there's no styles in it at all. I see that a lot. So the first thing I like to do when I'm dabbling with this is I always jump over to my settings tab, and if I right click where at the top here, and it's where it says ACAD, that's just the name of the drawing, and I go into the old edit drawing settings, and I'll pull up a document here in a little bit. I always go to this tab first, the Object Layers tab. And what this shows me is how uphill or possibly how downhill this cleanup of the template would be. The object layers, I often refer to it as layer mapping. On the left-hand side here, here's everything that we can create in Civil 3D, the intelligent objects, right? Whether it be pipe networks, points, surfaces, alignments, profiles, on and on and on. That's what we can create. The layer, this is the automated layer that is going to go to. And about half the templates that I work with when I go into this, this is what I see, where the layer is set to 0. There's no modifiers or any values added to it, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But so what that's saying, and there's ways around it, and I've even seen a couple of interesting ways where people purposely left those on layer 0. But what it does is every single thing we create, its insertion layer, like similar to a block. When you insert a block, it goes to the insertion layer. Everything is going to layer 0. So every alignment, every surface, on and on and on. And that's kind of drawing or tying your drawing in knots. Okay, so all right, fair enough. But when I see this, I know, all right, we're going to have to talk about some layer schemes and some other ideas going forward. Now, kind of staying in that same concept, I'll cancel that for a second. This one is the default template from Civil 3D. And this one is just the one that's straight out of the box. And my buddy actually built this, and I razz him on it periodically. But in fairness to him, it's solid. There's a lot you can do with it. But its main drawback is, it's not customized at all. It provides styles. If you don't have any styles, and I see this all the time, you have to use this. You can't. It's nearly impossible to run Civil 3D without a set of styles of some form. Now, this is without a doubt the most common one that I see. So if I go to that same settings tab, right click on it, go into my edit drawing settings here, I'll see this where the layers, at least it has a version of the National CAD standards there. And you can see C dash, and so forth. At least that is going to break out my surfaces to C dash topo, my alignments. In this case, they're using C dash road, which I think should be C dash align. I think that's the true National CAD standard for it, but neither here nor there. But what I don't see are these things that we call modifiers. Okay, so this is one spot that I look for. Now, I'm surely not trying to pat myself on the back by any means. I just grabbed this template. Here's one that that you'll be receiving here in just a bit. Drawing aid, I just left it at that. We could save its name, whatever. And if I edit the drawing settings on this one, when I start seeing this is when I know that people are digging in to their template and they're actually trying to streamline processes and just make the program as a whole easier to use. So you can see where same exact settings, but this is using I use National CAD standards for this, so the alignment is C-align, but where it differs from the last ones is the suffix, okay? And these are incredibly simple. You just click on it, drop it down, and you either change it to, prefix, suffix, or as we've already seen prior, they were all set to none. And what that does is that ends up with a suffix, you can then add in a value. And if I stayed with sort of the formatting, in the National CAD standards, they're using C as the call out, which is C for civil, V for survey, and then it's utilizing a dash, and then it's just the actual entity itself. ALGN is for alignment, and then it's just a series of whatever your format is, dash, and then it's just 4 letters, 4 letters, 4 letters. And for those of you that know me, I'm surely not a conformist by any means. The National CAD standards, even though it's got that spooky name, it's not an exact science, other than those first 2 callouts, the discipline and then the entity. After that, you can just do, you could put whatever you want in there if you wanted to, but if you wanted to stay in the National CAD standards realm, you would say dash and then 4 letters, dash, 4 letters, dash, 4 letters. And to make this kind of simple, if I slide on down the very bottom here, everybody works with surfaces, whether you're on the survey side of things or engineering side of things. You'll see where it says tin surface. Every surface that you create, whether it's an existing ground or it's a corridor surface possibly, it's going to go to C-topo, but whatever we name it with that suffix, and there's a dash and an asterisk here, this is a really wonderful key setting. So for those of you that haven't used this, I'll put this in motion for us too. Very, very important. So there is no mapping that takes place. We don't have to do anything. Once we have this set up accordingly, if we created a surface and we named that surface EG, that little dash in the wildcard or the asterisk will steal the name of the surface. So therefore, it'll, if we called it EG, we'd have a brand new layer automated at time of creation, new surface. It would go C-topo-EG. If it was I don't know, I always say something like pond. If we created a pond and we created that surface pond, named it pond or whatever, it would go C-topo-pond. So we have, it's being created as we go, okay? Or in essence on the fly. Now, a couple other things I look for, and I'll go back to this AutoCAD, or excuse me, not AutoCAD, but the Civil 3D, the default template. Another thing I look for is layer counts. So the default template, without drawing anything with that one, has 212. I think the other ones have 211. I may have drawn something. I don't know. But there's and that's not a ton of layers by any means. But that is quite a few. It depends on if you have point styles in there and how you want to organize those. And that's some of the stuff we'll be looking at later. But before we've drawn anything, this one appears to have 212 layers. Again, that's not horrendous by any means, but I have ran into some where I'm reviewing templates, and I was up in Alaska and I ran into one that had just about, it was 2,400, 2,400. I can't remember what the remainder on it was, but it was almost 2,500 layers at startup without drawing a lick. Nothing was drawn. So they spent a bulk of their time chasing layers. And there's different ways to organize that. You can have a secondary template and drag in layers that may, via that design center that we talked about. A good example of that might be a landscape architect possibly has a whole series of layers that they use, but they're not really associated to Civil 3D. They're just AutoCAD layers, so to speak. So I'll often create a second style, or it's not even a style stem, it's just a drawing that we can drag those layers in with all those predefined output settings, line types, colors, and that kind of thing. And I'll show that later when we're talking Design Center a little bit. But that's a great way to get layer counts down. Now, speaking of which, now the one I'm going to send you here, I'm going to go ahead and pop it open. I'll look at its layers. There's more in here than I normally have. In this one in particular, I have 56 layers, and I think I have it roughly down to about 29. And don't get me wrong, there's always reasons where we need more layers, whatever it may be. But in this case, the reason why there's 56, I think I have this one down to about, like I said, 29, something like that. I can probably even shave a couple more here and there. But the reason why this one has 56 is I put a bunch of survey point layers in here. You'll notice that it says V-node, etc. And when we review this, but that's going to obviously add to the layer count. If you have, you want trees to be green, you want, who knows, whatever it may be, any utilities red and blue and on and on and on. So we would have those preset with the appropriate output style when we in the template at startup. And when we import points, it would recognize those and automatically change it. Okay. Now, as I'm talking about all of these, and thanks for hanging in there, this isn't the most exciting stuff. When I'm talking about all this, another thing I look at when I'm reviewing these templates, when I was just talking about that layer count, I often refer to this as layer bloat, where there's several needless layers just by default. And like I said, one size doesn't fit all, so that you may have a reason that you want to have it. But here's a good example where I shave a lot of layers down. So if I go to the default Civil 3D template that comes with the program here, I'll often show this one here, the surface style, and here's surface styles. If I expand that out, I'll just grab any one of these randomly. This is contours 1 and 5. I think they call them design and background, something like that. So on the display tab, as you know, on the display tab, these are those sub-component layers, okay? And and at least these are flexible. You can see that, like, oh, for instance, here's major contours. They're on a layer that's predefined in the template, C topo major new, and whatever that colors to is kind of greenish, but that's set at that layer level. So at least that's a good thing. We do have some flexibility with it. But what I look for in here is layers that we don't necessarily need. A couple of them just that scream out at me is this top one here called points, where it's going to this layer called C10. Points is a point editing entity that pops up where you can pick where triangles intersect or meet, whether it be from a point or whatever, and we can pick that point and we can edit that. And I think that's going to be on the third session. We'll be looking at things like that. But you don't really need a layer for it. That's just taking place right now, and I can't delete that layer because it's there's obviously a style here is dependent on it. And then triangles is usually one that I don't ever have a layer. I just have all of these set to 0. The only ones I ever really have would be for my majors and my minors, and I'd have those layers set. That way we get consistent plotting every time. But the other stuff, for the most part, is just extra layers that you don't really need. Triangles, though, might be worth mentioning. Often, I work with a lot of folks that do motor grading. They may want a layer in there that's for triangles so they can isolate things down or something like that. But there's other tools in place where you can go to the surfaces, you could pick the surface, and as long as triangles are on, and in this case they're not turned on, but if I turn that light bulb on, I can extract those triangles from the surface with a command called extract from surface, and I can put those on whatever layer I wanted to and then send that drawing off to whoever needs it, and they need 3D faces or something like that. So there's, I would myself, and this is how I prefer what I've learned from you guys, that's something you don't do very often, so I personally don't like to have that one in place. I only create that when needed kind of deal. And again, the whole idea is just keeping the layer count down. So what do I mean by all of this? Let me pop up a document here, and I'm going to send this one on to you as well. And I often make fun of myself with this. It is a little on the boring side. I was joking around here in the beginning here. And what this is, years ago I put this together for a firm. They had me build an incredibly elaborate template for them, and they were just getting up to speed in Civil 3D, and they didn't know how to use the template. And they didn't, well, they quite honestly, they just hadn't had the experience with Civil 3D, so let alone template, Civil 3D as a whole. They just didn't know how to use it. So I wrote this document up, and I homogenized it some so it sort of fits everybody. And I've been threatening to change a word or two here, but not to bore you with it, but I give a little preface before I get too deep into this thing is basically there's 3 types of styles templates, and you see those bullet points there. I called it style controlled, object layer controlled, or a hybrid, possibly of both. And when years ago now, when they handed us the box of Civil 3D and said install it, we're going to be using this one day, we were trying to, we did this thing called style, or what I'm referring to as style controlled. And this document has examples, and we'll get down there in a little bit here. Here's style controlled. In fact, I'll show it, a little dialog box here. What it's saying is inside of here, you'll see that there's line, curve, spiral. When that alignment gets drawn, it's going to automatically put those on a layer called C road center, in this case N for new. But it's hard coded here where it says color is green. Now I'm just using the alignment, but we'll see this in motion here when we're dealing with points in a little bit. So this is hard coded, meaning it's great for standards, and if I draw this new proposed alignment, it'll come in green, and it's perfect. But if you have one viewport that's showing that we want it to be green, but the very next viewport, for whatever reason, we want it grayscaled or in the background, we could go find it, change the layer that it's on to a different color, but due to hierarchy, the style is dictating that it's green. So it's still going to take precedence. Even if we moved it, for that matter, we could grab the alignment, put it on a completely different layer, and change the color on that new layer, but it's not going to change because it goes back to its origin, and it says this, when it was created, this has to be green. So it really limits you. Now, we're just talking about alignments right now, but notice the line types hard-coded there as center as well. We're talking alignments, but for those of you that dabble in pipes, this is kind of the game changer when it comes to pipes. What I would do, instead of having all of these predefined layers here, I would have these set to 0. Okay, now it sounds kind of crazy, but what it does is styles work like blocks. If you insert a block, and if you're, just a typical survey block, if it was created correctly, hopefully it's a, just in raw AutoCAD scale 1:1 on layer 0. And if you insert that, who knows, tree symbol or whatever it is, block is just a drawing, as it comes in, because it's on layer 0, it's going to inherit whatever your current layer is. So if it was a tree and we inserted, IN or whatever you want to do, and you brought that into the drawing, and we had a layer called tree and it was green, because of the way it was created on layer 0, it will automatically inherit the color green from that inserted layer. So that's what these will do, okay, if they're zeroed out. Now, you might not do it with an alignment, but I may show that. So that whole concept then with that style controlled, it's excellent for maintaining standards, but flexibility becomes a problem. So the next one down, and I'm going to show this, so this may not make a ton of sense yet, but the next one down is object layer controlled, okay? And what that's saying or suggesting, if I go down to this picture down here, this is looking at a surface, or excuse me, this is looking at that same alignment. Now, in this case, what it's doing is, notice that everything is set to 0. So with those layers mapped accordingly, this is what we were talking about, or I was showing off here. One of the first things I go look at in the drawing settings under object layers, if I create an alignment, this one is going to go C-align, and then the suffix is being utilized with that dash and an asterisk. So if we were to call this, who knows, main road, main, or something like that, the layer will get created C-align main. And now, if there's a con to this, it'll initially come in white, but because of these settings up here, all I'd have to do
Uh-oh, it looks like maybe we lost Kevin's audio.
audio connection restored. Good.
Oh, there we go. All right, Andy's back.
And he's back. How long was I gone?
Oh, a good 30 seconds or better.
Okay, I'm not sure. I was just talking about these layers here. Thank you, Wendy. In fact, I just mentioned that it said my audio was lost for whatever reason, but I am back, you lucky devils. Hope everyone's still awake. All right. So anyway, quickly, what I was just saying there is those settings down here, they're going to automatically be, because we have the automation of layers, by default here, I create a new alignment. I think I suggested name it main road or something like that. And then it'll go C-align main. And I just would go to that layer and change it there. Where this is a game changer on the pipes side of things is I can have all my pipes to do this as well. And instead of having tons and tons of layers within my pipes, if they're all set to 0 in here, it'll automatically go to whatever I call that pipe run or pipe network. If I call it storm, it would say something like C-pnet pipe network dash storm or sewer or whatever it is. Okay, so it's this really easy way to manipulate that data after the fact. And then the last one, and I'll put this in motion for us here. The last one is the hybrid, which is over the years we started kind of playing with these things There is some layers that you're going to want in your styles template. I mentioned surfaces. I always want to have existing surface contours and proposed surface contours. I want layers to represent those from the start. That way, you know, if I come to work for you tomorrow and you say build these surfaces, all I have to do is apply your style and it's always going to plot, and we have that consistency. However, we because it says that it retains the or not retains, but gets its style or its output from the I'm talking with my hands here. It comes from the layer itself, because everything is set to by layer. You know, again, we can do whatever we want with it. So, all right, fair enough. Now there's a neat, and you'll receive this here too, and I'll put that into motion, and then as we start playing with the points, I'm going to come back to that to hopefully solidify what I'm talking about here. So in this drawing here, this is the I guess template, if you will, that I'm going to send out to you. And quick point of reference here. I'll do something like this. Quick zoom extents here. I think I'll move that so we're not in negative values. Okay. Fair enough. All right, different ways I can create this. Maybe I'll scoot over here a little bit. I just needed some kind of feel for what we were looking at here. So I'm using alignments, but this could be pipe networks, this, you know, whatever it may be. And when we looked at the layers, I think we roughly said that there was 56 of them in here, something like that. Now, if I go to alignment and I'll say alignment creation tools, and I'll just create a quick alignment, and I'll use that example I was talking about earlier, and I'll say this is like the main road or something like that. Center line, fair enough, doesn't matter with any of this. And then the alignment styles, if I drop this down, there's one in particular that I'm talking about. I do have, for the record, I do have existing and proposed inside here. So when I initially put this template together, it was for a firm that had some folks that some were better users than others, and so they wanted to sort of a foolproof. If this was a proposed alignment, we could pick proposed, and we sort of we did. We hard coded those. In fact, let me grab that proposed one for a second and peek inside of it so you can see what I'm talking about here. So in this case, we still left the layers zeroed out, okay? But in their case, they needed the color always to be blue. We didn't mess with the line types. We said that could still be adjusted via the layer itself. So this was just like I said, sort of a foolproof way. If somebody drew an alignment, it would always be blue. However, when we create this, it's going to call it C-align- main, the name of the road. Now this other one that I use throughout the program for various reasons, I started referring to it as flex, for flexible. And if we took a quick peek inside of that one, notice that everything's still zeroed out. Colors are by layer, line types are by layer, and so forth. So I'm going to just use that one, and then I'll just quickly draw this thing out, whatever the labels are, and I'll say okay to this. And as you know, we'll just say, I don't know, tangents, no curves. I'll just throw something in here real quick. Now, if there's a drawback to this method, whether it be alignments, pipes, you know, different things like that, notice that it does come in all white, okay? And this is just a default setting. That's just a font that's using this a little bit more bold. Now if it's a one-time setting, you would have to have your team, and I'm not saying you have to do it this way by any means. This is just a method that a lot of people like. Okay, I just wanted you to see this option, and it really lends itself to some of the other things that we're going to do. So if this is a method and you have a team that's diligent enough to make sure that their proposed alignments are a certain color and line types and so forth, that's where we can go into our layers. And in this case, this didn't exist. So that's due to the automation, C-align-main. Perfect. So that was created. Now there's a secondary piece here that we discovered as well. Notice directly underneath it, and I'll go back to that setting and show it off. Actually, I think I can use this here. drag this over here for a second. So here's sort of this byproduct that we discovered as well, or another little feature. Under that alignment, there's those settings back in the drawing settings, and this is a one-time deal. Obviously, we want this built into your template, so you don't always have to do this. But directly underneath it, where it says alignment labeling, that's also C-align. There's a suffix there. We utilize the suffix, and then what we did is we put a dash, an asterisk, dash, and then the National CAD Standard label. So, the label's on layer 02, and what it does, well, as it gets created, but due to the insertion layer, so I'll start here with the main road here. I don't know, pick your color, whatever your poison is here. I'll say yellow, and maybe I'll say the line type is center line. So if I move this out of the way, you'll see that now has that center line type and it's yellow, one-time setting, okay? Now, I mentioned byproduct. Here's the real byproduct that I wanted to show, is both of those got created as I created it. Again, this is huge in pipe networks, but it also groups my alignments together. I mentioned that template that had 2,400 not styles, but layers in it. They had, they'd have to go way up to the top for their alignments, and then 2/3 of the way down to try to find the appropriate labels for it. And they were chasing layers all the time. These are all grouped nicely together. So, just to be obnoxious here, to change the color, I'll change that label to magenta. And if I get rid of that for a second, you'll see that now we have a yellow line type. Now, I don't want to oversell this though. Obviously, you'd have to have a team that could adhere to standards. If and you know who you are. If there's some folks that they're kind of doing everything on their own, this might not be the best technique. Now, the reason why I show this briefly, and I don't have anything set up in here, I'll kind of mock another one in here. I'll say alignment creation tool, same thing. And maybe this is the side road. And I'll slide on down here and I'll use that same style. I'll say that centerline flex, same labels, whatever. And we'll pretend that this does something like a T intersection or something like that. And I'll just kind of rough it in, whatever, just close. And again, it starts its life in its kind of a generic state. And there's a couple little other tweaks that we could do to it. We could have a line type automatically. The line type is probably not going to change. But I love this aspect of it, is everything is grouped together. So there's that alignment. That's the second one. And I don't know, I'll just change it to something different. This is the side road. I'll just make that magenta for kicks. I'm not concerned about the text. That's all just style stuff. Now, the reason why this is so, the reason why I'm promoting this, I guess, is, and here's where I don't really have anything set up. This is just a layout here. And if I were to throw in a quick, a couple viewports or something like that. And I'll just copy that over. You shouldn't copy those. Yeah, it don't matter. All right. So I'll go into this one. I'll do like a zoom extents. And now with styles, and this is where you get into your whatever the style may be, we can set the overall text height of the style regardless of the scale. This is again, I don't have anything set up for this. So if I'm inside that viewport, I'm actually in paper space and I can zoom in and it appears that everything's getting gigantic, and it is. It's just zooming in. But if I regen it, just do a quick REA, all that text is going to go down to its normal size. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is 0.10 text height. So that was just a random scale. Maybe we're zooming in on an intersection. If I go into this one, and I'll have to test it, I just drew that out of the blue. If I select it, and maybe we want this one to be let's see what 1 to 50 looks like. Oh, a little too much. How about we'll say, we'll go 1 to 20. Oop, I went the wrong way. 1 to 100. Now that one, regardless of my paper space scale, that doesn't matter. I can go inside this thing, move it, and then regen it. And due to styles, it automatically said the text height, again, whatever I plot this at, the viewports are going to dictate the text height of whether it be a point or an alignment or a label on a surface, whatever, okay? Now, lastly, and here's where I'm going with all this. I'm trying to, this long drawn out process here, I'm trying to show the flexibility, right? So inside of here, you know, if I hover over that, you can see that they are linked. I mean, it is the same alignment. But being that I'm in the secondary one here, I can go into the layer properties and I'm going to change, I'll move this out of the way so we can see what we're talking about here. I'm going to change that side road, which is currently, here's the side road. The global setting is magenta, okay? Now, I'm using an alignment. You may not do it here, but I think it's easy to understand what I'm talking about utilizing alignments. But if this was, again, a pipe network or whatever it may be, surfaces, a specific you know, details within a surface, a major contour, who knows? This is going to be set up in this hybrid concept where it's getting its information, its output settings from the layer. So globally, I have it set to magenta. But if I slide over, and you'll see that there's a viewport color, VP color, that's magenta. I can override just that particular viewport. Maybe I'll make it dark blue. And if I OK this, and if I slide back just to prove it here, dark blue in the viewport color, but globally it's still magenta. And if we look at that, now you can see that that's, get out of it so I can zoom in a bit. There it goes. I don't know if you can quite make that out, but that's blue, still the same thing. And if I go back to my model space, it didn't change it. So anywhere that was in the drawing, it's only changing it in that viewport. And that's because we gave control to that layer, okay? And I'm gonna just poke out here for a second. Are there any questions coming in? Because now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts. But I needed you to see all of those presets before we get into our points in that. Okay, it looks like we're doing okay. And I'll make sure I open it up here too at the end where we can talk about, you know, everything here. So, all right. So a couple more things. And let's start talking points. And and forgive me, I'm just going to use one of my current drawings that that we'll often use in class here. And this one I just called description key, okay, the drawing itself. And what's inside of this is what we want to make sure that we have in place on your template. There's going to be a few things, okay? So on my settings tab, if I slide on down to points and I take a look at these description key sets, and this is an old file. I love getting a chance to use it. So anytime I can pull it out, it makes me happy. This is one of the old Autodesk files that goes way, way back. You've probably seen it, and I left it as Portsmouth. And if I just kind of doing a quick tally of what's inside this drawing, if I right click on that and go into edit keys on this, and I kept it really, really simple on purpose for, you know, I guess sort of a classroom or conveying the message. This is a real job back east, and this is just the description key file, okay? And when we take a look at the drawing I'm going to send you, I've sort of homogenized it and makes it a little bit easier to see because everyone's raw descriptions are going to, the description that they record in the field, that's going to be different from drawing, you know, from firm to firm, agency to agency. So and we'll take a look at that. In this case, this is a very rural setting out there. And they got ground shots, iron pins. They don't have a lot because it's raw land. It was a subdivision that went in. So I just created a key for POW. That's a point on a wall, meets and bounds. Survey stations, there are no sewer manholes, but as you know, if you have a description key file set up, it's, you know, if you don't pick it up on the field, it's just not going to be picked up. Then there's trees, utility poles, and so forth, okay? The style, which we'll be looking at, that's the point style. Okay, and there's some key settings in there that we're going to want to take a look at here in just a bit. And then I have a point label style set up. Now, for what it's worth, the format, and if you have my email, I'll make sure it's up at the end again. If you need more information on this format concept, there's a couple of good white papers out there. This is old school. This stuff goes back to Sofdesk. The $ asterisk is nothing more than code that says steal whatever you punched in the data collector and in the field. Data collection systems have changed a bit too, though. In the past, we used to have to enter in numbers or codes. Now, a lot of times it's done via dropdown. So, but if you were manually entering in, say, you found an iron pin and you typed in IP, that little asterisk that's right next to it, all it cares about is when it sees IP as the prefix. Then you could go space and you could say, you put in an LS number or whatever you wanted to do. And that $ asterisk is going to automatically go out, say, okay, perfect, iron pin is found, and then the raw description or format, it'll change the raw description to it'll say IP space and then give you that LS number or found disturbed or whatever you happen to punch in manually in the field. The point style dictates the symbol, okay? And we're gonna see that here in a little bit. So I'm gonna cancel that for a second. I just wanted you to know up front, I did build this in. And my guess is a huge percentage of you are gonna have this part in place, some form of description key file. If it's not consistent, or well, it has to be consistent, but if it's not, thorough or all in place, get a hold of us. We can help you out one way or another to further your list or whatever it may be. Okay. Now, in the prospector is where we do our work, right? We all know that. And I have a few point groups pre-created. So I'm talking about a couple things at the same time. So the all points point group is always there. When you bring in points, that's automatically gonna, that's the drawings database, okay? And I have one in here called no display, and I think I'm gonna do this right from scratch. So I'm gonna take that and sort of convey the message all in one. I'll delete that. So right now there's nothing in this drawing, but I do have a description key file, and we'll suggest that we send our team out, they gathered points and they're bringing that in, and we're gonna run that through the description key file. So, all right, fair enough. So different ways to do it. I'm just gonna go to my insert tab here, points from a file, and you'll recognize this, and top to bottom on this thing. So if I hit the plus sign, and plus always means go out and grab something, right? So I'm going to go to my point file that I set up for this, and I need I'll say all files. And in this list, there's one in here called description key 2. Now, one thing about this, I purposely set this up or left it in Autodesk's format. That way we can kind of see pros and cons to it, and then we'll make edits to it going forward. And these are these key usability settings that I'm referring to, okay? So now, as a side note, I can right click on this while I'm in the command. Who knows, maybe you're working with a consultant and they send you a point file. I'm not exactly sure what's in it. I can right click on it and open it on the fly. And we can see it's got a point number. This we'd have to do a little research on. It's a northing and easting. It's the zenith or elevation, and then the raw descriptions. And it's broken up by commas. In this case, this is comma delimited rather than space culminated, okay? So just as a side note. So we know, so that is referred to as PNEZD, point number, northing, easting, zenith or elevation, and finally a description. Okay, great. So I'll just highlight that and that'll make a link to it. And then the program does its best to guess of what that format is. It may not know if it's easting, northing, or northing and easting. So we just have to tell it which one it is, PNEZD. And it gives me a quick little visual down here, okay? So far so good. And when I okay this, all these points come in. Does that look familiar? All right, so what I'm looking for on this, maybe I'll make the scale a little bit bigger just so we can see things. What I'm looking for is symbols. Did they come in? And in fact, there's that tree symbol that this is just their defaults. Forgive me, because there was a lot of points on a wall, I just put a benchmark symbol in there for conversation purposes. You'll see them all over the place. And there's survey stations and the utility poles and whatever else is in here. Okay, and we'll create one together, and I want you to see these key components, right? So what it did is it ran its way through, and let's take a quick peek at that. Okay, going back through, I'm speaking of the trees, for instance. So I'm going to say edit the keys. I just right-clicked on the name of the description key file. Now, if I go down here, this is just the way they were gathering the data. There's a TR for tree, and the point style is set to tree. We're going to dive into one of those here in a little bit. And label style, of course, is just default point number, elevation, and description. And then there's that format. It also automatically created a layer for me when that came in. So now that should be on vnode tree, okay? And then because that $asterisk, if we go look at it, it'll probably spell it out. I think they actually punched in TREE in the data collector, but the little wildcard just looks for that TR. So it all should be well. So here's where I'm going with all of this is, in fact, these ones, it looks like it was they probably shot a tree that had a wire on it, maybe a boundary or some sort of fence or emulating a fence, who knows. So, all right, fair enough. We can see that we got its point number, elevation, and that description. So that came in okay. But here's the example I like to use. There could be several different reasons, but if I pick it up front, just right off the bat, if I pick that up front, and because of my settings, this is where stuff starts wrapping back around, it's telling me vnode tree. So that worked out, showing off that quick access toolbar. Cool, that makes life a little bit easier for us. I can hit escape on that. And so far so good. However, if it's common where you'll have a drawing, maybe you've had to go out, you survey it, and you're preparing maps, whatever, and then at some point somebody says, okay, maybe it's in an intersection, and they say, these trees, some of these are going to have to be removed for site purposes at this updated intersection. So you may go back into the drawing, and we might create a layer called, tree removal, and give it some kind of like grayscaled color or something like that. I'm going somewhere with this. Now I'm just gonna grab a predefined color or layer. But if I pick that tree, okay, we already know that it's on vnode tree, and I could do this through properties or whatever. And if I drop this down, and I'll grab one. It doesn't matter which one I'm grabbing, but we would have probably a predefined layer that says tree removal, something like that. And I'll just grab this one because it's kind of a sort of a, I don't know, I'm colorblind. I hope that's pinkish. Now, if I hit escape, that tree didn't change. It's still green. So that makes me think, did I miss something? So if I go pick it again, take a second here, notice that it did in fact switch over to that layer. So that is on that layer. The problem is we have two different things telling that point what to do. This is, and I see this more often than not, and this is what I wanted to, the big reason why we're here today, that you just old-fashioned usability, okay? So what's actually happening is, if we go look at that style, the point style in this case, which is tree, okay? And if I switch to my settings tab for a second, and we go locate under points, because it has something to do with a point, I'll go to my point styles, and lo and behold, somewhere in there is tree. And if I look inside that, you can double click on it or right click on it, whatever, and that'll pull up our editor. And the first thing I'm going to look for, I'm going to switch to my display tab, okay? Now in this case, it's kind of a double setting that's happening. And I see this one all the time. And again, not that it's wrong. You may prefer to work with it like this. But the marker is, as it got created, it says go to the vnode tree. So this is taking precedence, saying the output of this tree is set to by layer of by this layer. So if we went and looked at that layer, it's remembering where its origin. So even though it switched to a new layer, it's still getting data, or it's still getting its output properties from the original point style. So these are things that we would want to change going in. There's just a handful of simple things that we would change, okay? And that's what we're going to do here in just a moment. We're going to create one so you can see how that one plays out. Okay, in fact, let's go ahead and do that now. Might as well do that now. So what I'm going to create a different one here that should work a bit better. I added a bunch of points to this this file called shrubs. There's one right there, and we'll build it how I would suggest to build it. It's a suggestion here, but this is what I see out in the industry that's working really well. And then we'll talk about visualization, how to control it. So I'm going to kind of do it more manual. We could work right in the description key file, but I think this will help on your end, where you can go into this and just basically find where these locations and settings are. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to my settings tab. We're going to create this one called shrub. And by the way, there happens to be one in Autodesk's template. It's called bush or something like that, BSH 5 foot, which I get a kick out of it in its own right. It's suggesting that every bush they ever find is exactly 5 feet, regardless of your scale. So whatever. But I always tell everybody, when you're creating something, especially a new style, find something close. Don't, even if it's not exact by any means, just find something relatively close. That'll allow you to go in and then make edits to key locations rather than having to reinvent the world for everything, okay? So what I'm gonna do then is I'm gonna right click on this one and I'm gonna copy it. And I wanted to just bounce through a couple of key pieces here, and this is recorded, so when you get this, you'll be able to, backtrack on this too and find exactly what I'm talking about. So I copied it, so right now it says bush 5 foot copy. I'm going to change this to shrub, and I'll just make it uppercase so it's easy to find for us. And then I'll get rid of this description because it's no longer going to be good. That says something to the effect of a 5 foot shrub. Now the point style is what goes out, and that's where we establish the symbol, okay? So the marker is where that's takes place. And you can see over here, there's that block that's being used. And there's 3 ways to set this. The first one's never used. If I click on it, you can't really see it. Maybe you can see it on your screen, but there's like a pixel there. It's rarely used. The custom marker, you could put in like an X and you can superimpose it and do all kinds of stuff with it. Those are just using predefined, what they call marker styles. They're styles in their own right, look very similar to this dialog box that we're in. It's not, has nothing to do with like PD mode that we used to have to set. These are just additional blocks. The third one down is survey blocks that have been brought into the template at start, okay? So I don't know if you can quite make it out, but it's actually shrub 2 is the one that's being utilized. And like I said, that may be the block. You could bring in a different block, whatever. Now, I always point this out. It's kind of funny, but if you're building these on the fly and you happen to have a set of blocks or whatever, you could have inserted that block up front, brought it into your drawing so there's actually a block, what do they call that? A block definition. Then you can erase it and that definition will still be in this list. But if I'm doing it on the fly and I needed to browse out and find a block, you can just simply right click and there's a browse. And if I hit browse, it'll let me browse to any location where I may happen to have a survey symbol, okay? So that's just a sort of a direct way of doing it. So again, you're always working in this area, and you'll see here shrub 2 is selected, but if I hit like the one above it, there's a manhole or a survey station, whatever it is. I'll go back to that shrub. So these are just the listed block definitions in the current drawing. You can always add to it so they'll show up in this dialog box to make this easier. So again, we copied it. We'll go back through all of these in a moment, but we said information, we renamed it, the markers where we get our symbol. In the upper right, this is where we size the block. And there's 4 of them. One of them you can kind of throw out. I'm always trying to boil things down and make it easy. The one that says, which one is it? Relative to screen on the bottom there. You can pretty much throw that out. I forget which ratio it uses it, but I think it's like 10% of the overall screen size or something like that, which basically means if you were to zoom in on a bunch of points, the points get smaller and smaller, which is great for like playing connect the dots. But it's terrible when you zoom out because then all the points get gigantic and cross over each other. So that one rarely, if ever, gets used. The one that's currently being used is use size in absolute units. So if we went and measured that block in the drawing, whether at 1 to 10 or 1 to 500, that block will be exactly 5 feet across in diameter. It actually goes north-south. So that's what's being, and sometimes that's good. You would want to use that on like a turn arrow. If I change the scale of my drawing on an intersection, I don't want my turn arrow to scale to my viewport scale. I want that to always be roughly 9 feet. Okay, so there is times and places for it. The most common one that's used is the one that says use drawing scale, and this works like a font. So what it's going to do, there's this little invisible box around this thing, and it measures the height. And what that's going to say is, if I say use the drawing scale, regardless of the scale of model space or any of my viewports, when I pull it up in any viewport or just simply model space, maybe you're plotting out a model space, it'll be at like a text height. In this case, it'll be 0.10. I'll make it big just so we can definitely see it. I'll say 0.15, just so it's larger. And if I hit apply, you'll see that it gets a little bit bigger there. Okay. Again, this will always plot, regardless of any of my scales, at 0.15 in text height. Doesn't matter where it comes from, the block. Some blocks are drawn at the wrong scale. This will always squeeze it down to that exact height, which is super cool and for consistency throughout. Now, there's 2 more quick settings that I want to show, and I'll go back and hit them before we add these in. 3D geometry is a big one. I'm using Autodesk default template. This is hands down what I normally see when I look at somebody's drawings. They have the geometry, the point display mode. They usually say use point elevation. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but what that's going to do is, you have a whole series of points. One point's at 100 feet, and the next point is at 110 feet. If I measured between those points via like node to node, we're going to get a vertical or a slope distance rather than a horizontal distance. So I would recommend that, and this is how we did in Land Desktop. If you drop that down, I would flatten points to an elevation of 0. And that scares a lot of folks because they think that now all their points are at 0. They're not. Only visually they're at 0. And in the survey world, that's perfect because that's where we're making all of our judgment calls. We're measuring slopes, or not slopes, but bearing and distances between monuments and points and that kind of thing. But if I build a surface from these points, the software is smart enough to know the true elevation. So it taps the database and pulls the point's true elevation. Now, to resolve the tree problem that we were talking about when I switched the trees over to a different layer, but they still retain the green output setting, that's handled under the display tab here. And currently, I copied the shrub one, and it's using this one called, or bush, and it's using this one called vnode tree. This is where it starts wrapping around further. I'm going to pick the top setting and the bottom setting at the same time with the shift button. And then I'm going to hit where it says vnode tree. And surprisingly, this may feel awkward, I'm going to set that to 0. Color is by layer, line type is by layer, and so forth. Now, just to be thorough, that's plan view. But if you were to bring in, if you're taken into an orbit, notice that that layer still exists. So I would just click on that again, hit 0. If I pulled these points into, say, a profile, they're still on that layer. I may say 0 for that one as well. And then you wouldn't have to do all these, but there's a cross section. I do the same thing. Now, the reason why I did that is because we're in a moment here, we're going to create the description key style that's going to give it its layer. We don't need two different places telling this to go to a shrub layer. That's what the description key file does. So I'm going to put that into motion then, okay? A quick review of these are the key settings. This is why I wanted you here today, is information tab. We copied it and renamed it. Marker. We're using the pre-existing, or you can right click and browse, okay? But there's really only three main things. 3D geometry, flatten points to elevation. If you happen to go through your list, this is a side note, and I've spent countless hours doing this. I've built styles where they've had 300 different point locations or styles or raw descriptions in the field. We had to create all these different point styles. It can take you a while where you just have to keep going through these, finding these three settings and then changing the layers. Once you have one created though, you can copy it. That makes it much easier. But again, we went to 3D geometry, we flattened them to 0. Software knows it's true elevation. And in the display, we changed it to layer 0. Sized it, flattened to 0, 0 layer. Now what that's going to do, now let's put that into motion. Nothing happened yet. I'm going to add a key to this before we play with a couple of the display things here. We're doing good. All right. So now I'm going to go to that description key file. So settings tab makes sense, has something to do with a point. There's description key sets, and there's the one that I'm using, the Portsmouth. If I right click on it and I edit those keys, and here's the current keys. Now I will say this, still 3D uses the panorama. That's what we're looking at here. And it's not bad. It's just a kind of an Excel spreadsheet vibe. But Land Desktop had a nice wizard, and this can get a little tricky, and that's another reason why I left them very small like this. Just a short list. If you said new key, often it resorts and you got to go find it. So there's a couple methods. For those of you who've built these, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But as a whole, it's simple. So the code then, that's the raw description in the field. So I'm going to do this. I'm just going to simply right click and I'm going to say new. And that's what I was talking about. See how it's sorted? And now if I had 250 of these, I'd have to go find that. What you can do is if you have a like column, you can just, like these are all $asterisk. In fact, I'll click on this. And if I now it's going to sort via this column. And if I right click and say new, see how it just placed it at the bottom. So that's a nice little trick. However, you may have to scroll down to it. I'll just play with this one up here. So the raw description, and it does take a little bit of clicking. You got to kind of finesse into a sort of a slow click or two until it highlights it. And it is case sensitive. So I'm going to say this is, it was shrub. I'll just, case sensitive SHR. Now I could spell out shrub, it'd work fine. But I'm going to go SHR, and then I'll put in this case, just kind of showing things that we talked about here. I could put an asterisk in there. That way, if it said SHR in whatever we recorded in the data collector, it's already spelled out the raw description. So if we have the format set with the $asterisk, it's going to automatically fill that in for us. Okay, so fair enough. The style, I'm going to go pick the point style I just created. So I'll pick on that little box, and where it says default, I'll just click on that, and it'll pull up my default box. I'll drop that down, and I'm going to go find that shrub that we set or created. That's where it's getting its block from. Fair enough. The point label style, these are actually two in the same: point number, elevation, and description, the default. But I'll just click on it to be consistent here, and I'll say, let's make them all point, elevation, and description. As a side note, I rarely, but I'll see some folks have certain locations of things where they may create a point label style that's like 45 degrees, just so when they're looking at it visually, they can tell that it's, for whatever reason, that 45 is a key point, or, whatever. Just you can do, and we can change them all later. Format, I'll leave that, so it's going to actually steal the entire word shrub, or I could even punch in, I could spell it out and say it's a shrub, whatever I want to do. So now this should be in place, okay? And I'll just close it. There's no saving. And those shrubs have not been activated yet. So if I did edits where I was changing elevations or something like that, we could re-import the points, but if I had those edits, it would overwrite those edits. So a really cool trick is in this case, I'll just zoom way out, and I'll just grab all of my points just with a crossing window. And I know some of you love this, the lasso. So I'll just grab them all, and you can actually pull this right off the command line too, or not the command line, but the ribbon. But I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say, okay, great. What do I want to do? About 2/3 of the way down, there's apply description keys. And just like that, edits and all, if I zoom in, we can see that those shrubs came in. They're at that 0.125 height. Perfect. Now, the tree was a problem. Let's say we wanted to get rid of some of these shrubs or just change them up. If I pick any one of them, just like that, great. And I want that to be on a different layer. If oh, interesting. Oh, you know what I did? My bad here. Let me do one other thing. I forgot to add my layer. So I'm going to go back into that Portsmouth and edit those keys. Okay. And then I'm going to slide back over. What I just got ahead of myself here, thinking my next step. So that there's that shrub. I'll locate it in my list. Did I not save it? Oh, yeah, there it is. I was looking for the full thing. So there's SHR. This is what I stopped early, the layer. I needed that to be on a layer. So I'll pick the little checkbox, and I believe I already created a layer. So I'll just pick my little empty spot. You just click on it and it pops this up. I could create a new layer on the fly, or we'll just find, I think I built one in here. In fact, I know I did. It's vnode shrb for shrub. Okay, so that's what's going to dictate the layer. And I can close that, and I'll just grab those again. And I'll say update or apply description keys. Let's see if that changes. I might have to erase them. We'll see. Nope, we're good. All right, so you can see that there's that vnode shrub, right? Well, in this case, because of those presets that we did, the description key it's just applying the appropriate block in that. We're letting the description key file dictate the layer. And I'll randomly drop this down and just grab, I don't know, whatever. I'll grab this wrong layer. You wouldn't do this, obviously. But if I hit escape now, see how that updated. So that could have been that if we had that tree removal layer, that would have gone to that, and it would be, some color that would allow us to either plot it more bold or just the opposite. If I select it, just like that tree, it did go to that other layer, but unlike the tree, this shrub inherited the properties of it. So very, very important. Okay, couple more things. All right, so now display. This is a big one. This I'm seeing more and more. This is a mature program. It's been around for a long time, so I'm actually seeing this usage quite a bit. But there's one little nuance to it. It's the like if we just want symbols only. Okay. So I'm gonna keep it real simple up front. These are styles that we want built, or not styles, but point groups that we want built into your drawing right up front or into your template. And I purposely don't have them in there because I wanted to build them with you. Okay. So what it would entail is under point groups. I switched to my prospector here. And the drawing that I give you will have this. If you were to click on point groups and we were to say new, and a point group is just like its namesake. It's a grouping of points. One point can be in as many point groups as you want. Okay, and we often use them to organize. We use them to date when points were possibly gathered. We use them for display purposes, surface building, on and on. And this one I'm going to call. Actually, before I do, let me show one other thing here. Oh, well, I'll name it first, and I'll go back into it. This one I'm going to call, which is quite common, no display, meaning all the points will be turned off. Okay. Now, I'm gonna okay this for now because I want to take a side note just so you can see exactly what's happening here. Let's look in this one called all points. I mentioned earlier that this one is always in the drawing. It's kind of the drawings database. It is the drawings database. So if I right click on it and I go into the properties of it, this is what we're looking at. So information. The only thing we can really change, you can't delete this all points point group, by the way, in case anybody's wondering. Can't change its name or anything. Notice it's all grayed out. But we can change its output. It's using a basic X and a point number, elevation, and description for all the points that came in. How this point group is put together, this is by default, it's a global point group. And if I go to the include, that's where we add points. Now, in future sessions here, when we get into surfaces, we'll be talking about this more in depth and creating queries to pull data into these point groups for surfaces. But in this case, the include tab is on, right? Or I switched to it. And this button down here says include all points. Now it's all grayed out. I can't do anything. But this creates what they call a query. And any point number greater than 0 globally will always go into this point group called all points. Okay? The only thing we can change, notice everything's gray. Whatever you go to, everything's gray. The only thing I can change again is its visualization, how I want the labels to look, the styles, and so forth. So I'm going to take that information, I'll cancel this, and go into the one that we were just playing with, the no display one. So, and this one, the idea to it is to globally turn everything off. And like I said, I'm seeing this pretty consistent now. This is pretty much throughout the industry, folks are using this. And it's great. I don't have to fight with layers. I can just set it current via hierarchy and turn everything off. But there is a couple of settings. So I'm going to right click on it and go into the properties of it because I left it off there with just the name. But I'm going to change the point style on this one to another style that's predefined called none. It's a style, just there's nothing turned on. And I'll do the same thing for the label style, none. Okay, check, check. Then I'm going to go to the include tab, and the purpose of this style is to globally turn off every point in the drawing with just a quick pick and click. Okay, so I'm going to say, just like the all points, I'm going to say include all points. Perfect, that's turned on. And now I'm trying to give you a little visual here. So watch what happens here. Looking back here, when I apply this, I'm expecting to see every point turned off. So if I hit apply, do you see, I assume you did, there was only a handful of them didn't turn off. This is a key component to this, and it's a one-time setting. What happened is when it comes to points and hierarchy, the top of the chain, the food chain, is the description key file. Okay, it dictates its layers, its blocks, and everything else. So what happened is those points that turned off, for whatever reason, they were random points or error points that I misentered in, and they didn't get picked up by that description key file. The rest of these were all in the description key file. So when I was expecting this to turn everything off, it didn't do it because, again, the description key file is in charge. So what I would do then is, and just to prove it here, if I go to my point list, this is just saying which points made it in. And if I scan down here, it's every single point in the drawing. We're just not getting the output information back on the information, none and none. So what I need to do is I need to override the description key file. And that's done, and lo and behold, there's a tab there called override. Now, once this is set, you never have to do it again. So this isn't something that you got to remember all the time. So under overrides, I'm going to say turn off the point style, trees, catch basins, on and on, to none. Same thing with the point label style. Override it to none. And when we OK this, everything turns off. Great. Why it turned off is hierarchy. Okay, that's what they call this. The hierarchy, currently point for point, these two point groups are identical. The no display and the all points point group, they're identical, point for point. But the no display one's on top. Once all of your information in here, I can simply right click on point groups and go to the properties. And I did this at the top layer, by the way. I right clicked on point groups, not these down here. That would be editing the point groups at the very top. And this lets me change my hierarchy around. I can say take all points, and you can either do them individually or just shoot it to the top. I only have 2 right now. And when I OK that, they should all come back on. Great. Now, here's where these point groups become incredibly powerful. There's 2 last things with this, okay, is knowing how this works, overriding the description key file. That's a key component to this. But I often will create temporary point groups. Maybe I'm tracing brake lines or buildings or whatever it is. And I happen to know that there's some shots in here that's like a centerline stream, okay? So I can create, I often refer to them as temporary point groups. I may delete these out later. And, or actually let's do survey stations. Maybe I want to see control points, only control points. So what I could do is create a new point group, say, right click on it and say new. And I'll say, let's just call this control. Check. Point style, I don't have to worry about that if I don't want to, because the description key file will take care of it. But just so you know, here's those different point styles. Maybe I do want to show it as a point style of station. Maybe to be thorough, let's just be different here. I want to use Autodesk's, I think they have one in here. Yeah, there's a northing and easting. For whatever reason, the label is going to be overwritten to this northing and easting look, okay? Then I can say include. And last time what we did is we just did a global include all points, but this is an isolated one. This is for survey stations. And the way that these were gathered in the field was STA1, STA2, STA3, so station 1, station 2, station 3 for the survey control. So, and those were the raw descriptions. So knowing that, and you would have to know your point file, I would say with raw descriptions matching down here, and it is case sensitive, so I'll make it uppercase STA, and this has been around forever, so most of you already know where I'm probably going with this. I can just put that asterisk, and it doesn't care if it's 1, 2, 3, up through 100, whatever. Just STA, and that takes care of it for us. Now, if I want these to show up correctly under my point list, or excuse me, over my overrides, the style, it's 2 in the same. I change it to a survey station, so I really don't have to change that. The description key file has the exact same setting for that. But if I want it to show as a northing and easting, I have to definitely toggle that on. Check. And I'll say OK. And if we zoom in somewhere and find a survey station, there's one with that block, and that just has that northing and easting. Here's that whole idea, though, isolation-wise, via point groups. I look over here. Here's my point groups. And what I'll do on this then is I want to only see the control points. Some of you are probably asking, well, could I just isolate the layer? Yeah, probably. But this is a really nice way where we can grab several things at once. If I right-click on point groups and go to the properties, remember that's the hierarchy setting. And if I look down this list, the last one I created is on top. That's the control.
These control points are in both of these description key files underneath it, but because it's being read first and its output properties tell it to look like this back here, that's why it's showing, because it's on top. But if I want to shut everything else off except that, then I'll just take that no display and shoot it directly underneath control. So it'll read the control points, output is expected, then every other point that gets picked up in no display, which already are accounting for the rest of them, everything will be turned off except our survey stations. And this is great because I'm not fighting layers. If I want them all back, I just go to point groups, right click, properties, say all points, shoot it up to the top, and everything comes back to where we started. Okay, so very, very nice. That's point group visualization. The last one I wanted to do on this, before we start talking about saving back to templates, is, I'm a couple minutes long, so forgive me here. We're not doing too bad though. So the last thing I want to do with this is the one that has kept surveyors for a long time not using the program. If I'll just use one of these trees again. End of the day, I'm just trying to plot my trees. But so, you know, it makes sense. It's how we always did it. We would use like a freeze command. There's freeze. It gives me a little freeze, and I'm expecting to just freeze the text. And you know what happens here. The whole darn thing turns off. The whole thing is an object. Okay. So I'm going to undo that. So that didn't work. So I've seen all kinds of creative things. People create all these different point groups. I've seen different types of layers built into the description keys. But if you do this right, it's pretty slick. This would be the third point group I would have pre-built into your template. And I always call it symbols only. So I'm going to right click on point groups and say new. And pops it up like this. And this would always be there. So I'll just abbreviate a little bit, sim only. Now, obviously, this is going to require consistency throughout. You have to make sure that your teams are going out and gathering data the same way. Otherwise, all this is useless. So, all right, we'll suggest that that's working. This symbol only, what we're going to do is utilize that same technique where we overwrote the description key file. So down below, the point style, I don't care what it is, because the description key file will take care of that, whether it's a tree, shrub, benchmark, monument, survey station, that takes care of the actual block itself. The label style, though, I want to set that to none. Okay. Now, when I'm saying consistency, and they did make this easy, and I kept our numbers real simple here and make it easy, the list. The include tab, you could go through these and you'd have to look through, you know, I don't know, pretty common, at least 150 different descriptions that are recorded in the field. You could go into each one of these and type IP, comma, SHR for shrub, comma, you know, on and on to get them to go in here. However, there's a tab just to the left called raw descriptions matching. And this list is populated from the description key file. If you have multiple description key files, they'll all show up in here. Years ago, when I worked with Port of Seattle, I sat down with their team, and we just, once we had everything defined, we just had to pick and choose which blocks we want on and a final plot, and which ones we didn't want on. So we just went with their team down the list. A ground shot, well, I don't want that in a final plot. I don't want an X. Any form of monumentation, yes, I would want those on. This is nothing. That was just a blank one I threw in there for kicks. Now, you have to suspend your belief system a bit. That I just put a benchmark on that one. We did build that one called shrub, so yeah, let's make sure that one's in there. Survey stations. This is an interesting one. This is a block that most likely you wouldn't plot at the end. It's only an informational block that comes into the drawing saying this is a very important control point, right? But again, because I don't have a lot in this, there's not a lot of diversity. Let's just turn it on for kicks. There are no sewer manholes, but if there were, trees, utility poles, on and on and on. And we would just pick and choose which blocks that we would want on only. So this may get you 80, 90% there, or more than that, 90 plus, maybe 100%. Every time, as long as you're gathering that data the same, then we can always go in later and update this further anyway. So it's just kind of an upfront piece. And what we're saying is, kind of reiterate, information, we call it symbol only, and we're only turning off the label style. We included by raw descriptions matching. So you'll have to have your description key built first. That makes it way easier. And now if I switch to that include tab, notice that it pre-filled those in for me. Okay. And then this is an override. So if I switch to the override tab, it won't work right now because the description key file is still dictating. The last move I have to do is say override the description key file, the point label style with none. That's important. Okay. And if I OK this, you'll see several things turned off. So my last move in this, many of the labels, it's just that point group hierarchy. Right click on point groups, and I'm going to go to the properties of that, right? Point groups, there's my hierarchy. I'm going to say symbols only is at the top because it was the last one I created. I want the no display one directly underneath it. Any other point is going to be turned off. And lo and behold, there is just our symbols. Now, I always like to do this, one last thing with this. I'm going to go to the properties, and I'm going to take that all points back up to the top so we see everything. Zing. And I'm going to do a no-no here. I don't have these locked into a database, so I'm just going to erase all those points. The whole purpose of today is figuring out if we have everything in place up front. We've got our point groups in place. We have our description key files in place. We have our point styles behaving as they should. And what I'm going to do is, pretending that I said brand new drawing, new, fires it right up, just like this. And we grabbed our template. Then I'll just redo that process. Points. Oh, actually, I'll go this route. I'll say insert points from a file, and I'll go out and grab that same point file. I think we use this one here. If I'm not mistaken, it was, let me just double check that. I think I grabbed the right one, but just to be sure. Plus description key 2. Then I want to make sure its format is correct, PNEZD, comma delimited. Everything's good. I'll say OK. At some point, my points come back in. You can see the trees, all the other things. The shrubs are going to come in. Everything is there. Notice that all my point groups have that, looks like a yellow home plate with an asterisk or a exclamation point on it. I just have to update those. You can update them one by one or just simply right at the top, right click and say update all. Poof, now everything's updated. If it's set up correctly like this, here's the final process. Maybe I just need a quick plot. So I would just go to my point groups, properties, remember at the very top, right click, brings up my hierarchy. I shoot my symbols only to the top, and I would take my no display one directly underneath that. And when we OK it, we're ready to go. If I need to add or subtract from that point group, nothing to it. You just go right click, properties of that point group, and either include data or exclude data. If I wanted to get rid of some, I could say exclude with either raw descriptions or select them off the screen and just go grab them and they disappear. And that's going to be in the third session for those of you that are attending. We're going to get more into the surface building and break lines and more complex surfaces. All right, so last couple things, and I'll cut you loose, promise. What I wanted to do on this is just talking about sharing styles. Very, very common that that once we start getting these things built, at some point we're going to want to make sure that we, get that data back into our drawing or our template. And in fact, the drawing that I'll send you here at the end, if there's certain aspects of it that you like, you'll still have to make it your own, but you'll go into this and then you can just simply drag and drop. So I'm gonna go to this this AutoCAD drawing for a second. I'm gonna go back to this one because this one's completely void of styles. This is where we started. We were just looking at a few things. And if I go look at, settings tab and I go to my point styles, there's nothing in there. So there's nothing for me to grab. So what I would do is, and the way this works is you set your drawing or your template current. And there's two ways I can tell. Because I switched to that tab, you can see that that tab is highlighted. And also at the very top, that says ACAD, same name, okay? So that's the current, or I always refer to as the destination drawing, okay? And I want to go to this one over here called drawing 8 the description keys where we created some. Now, there's another way of doing this bigger picture. I'm not sure if I'm a huge fan of it, but you can actually go to the Manage tab. As a side note, you can go to the Manage tab. Where are we at there? And I actually, over on the right, you can import styles, but it analyzes everything and brings a lot of data in. It just depends on what you want to do. My goal in here is just kind of showing project to project as things grow. As your styles grow, you might want to be bringing them, somewhat onesie twosie, if you will. So I'm going to go back. It doesn't matter. Just reiterate. That's my destination. That's at the top. The only thing I need to do when it comes to the settings tabs where all our styles are stored, what I would do then is I would expand, or not expand, but where it says active drawing setting, that's only my current drawing. I'm going to click on this and I'm going to say master view. And what this does is this shows every drawing that I have open at any given time. I only use this when I'm sharing styles, by the way. I usually turn this off because it's easy to get them kind of mixed up. And what I would do then with master view, I would browse to the appropriate drawing. In this case, it was that description key that we created, those shrubs or whatever. And I would slide on down here under points. Here's point styles. And there's all of the point styles. If I want shrub in my current drawing, which is ACAD, and it's appropriate, whatever layers or whatever, you just click on it and hold, and I'll drag that right in. And when I let go, now if I switch back over to the, at the top here, under that ACAD, there's the point. There's my point styles. There's shrub that was added in. You can grab several things or one at a time. You can use a shift right click and pull a ton of stuff in, whatever it is. Same thing with point groups. In this case, I would switch to my prospector tab. And then I would switch, now the prospector, notice that one says active drawing. So that one needs to be switched to master view. And then looking down this list here, I'm gonna go to the, under master view here, I'm gonna go to my, oh, actually, sorry, what did I do there? Oh, no, I'm fine. I just was looking in the wrong drawing. Here's description key, point groups. And if I wanted that no display, I just would highlight it and drag it in. Same thing with the symbols only. And that's how you just would drag those in, and that would be in your template, and then you would save your template and they would be ready to go up front. Now, the last thing I wanted to show with this, that's all it is. Sharing styles is nothing more than switching the top to master view and then simply dragging, nothing more than dragging in the styles that you want. The design center, I showed you when we first started, we could go to the big letter C and type in design center, or I could locate it. It's on the home tab. And you'll see that there's a drop-down arrow where it says palettes. And I'll leave this up for a second for you to view it later there. There's Design Center, same thing. And what this does, I was talking about how this is a fantastic tool to steal stuff from drawings. The drawings don't even have to be open. But in this case, I have some open drawings. My destination, I'm still in an AutoCAD drawing, it's just raw. So what I could do then is, there's basically three ways. There's folders, which lets me go browse to a folder that has nothing to do with what we're doing, other than it has the information we want. Or I could just say, show me my open drawings. Check. My current drawing is that AutoCAD. Maybe I'll go to this one called Civil 3D. And what you'll see when I highlight it there, here's all of the stuff that we can steal out of it. It's all AutoCAD stuff. It could be predefined layouts. You'll see that that's in there. In this case, maybe I just want to grab a bunch of layers. So I could click on that and I can drop down. I could do it this way, but if I drop this down and say, show it to me in more of a detail. Now, if we went back to this drawing, these all have predefined line types, colors, everything else. I'll just grab a handful of them. I just grabbed a whole bunch of them there. And with them highlighted like that, I just left click, hold again. And back in my new drawing, oops, did I miss some? I may have. That does work, promise. You can right click too. I could right click on it. It's not, for some reason, it's just not selecting them. But if I right click on my highlight and say add layers, it'll dump those right into it. And there they all are with the output settings. Okay. Now, last thing I need to show today, and I'll cut you loose here. I appreciate it. Sorry, it took a little longer than I thought. Last thing I wanted to show, and this is a version of it, the template of the settings. So I'll pull up that slide here in a minute. I did throw a couple extra things in here, but everything that we talked about is in place. Okay. We talked about under the settings tab, and this is the template that I'm going to send over. Under the settings tab, I'm going to switch this back to active. It just makes it easier. If I right click and say edit drawing settings, the object layers are all pre-defined, which you may change these. Okay, so there's nothing to it. You just, if you don't like C dash line or you want it to be V align, you can just click on it here and go browse to whatever layer you want it to be. All the suffixes are in place with the labels on the ends. Okay, check. Getting down to now the description key file, there's the way I set that, I'm going to switch over to my points description key sets, and I just called it Jumpstart here. And if I right click and go into that for edit keys, I put quite a few of them in here, but these are, it's purely the name Jumpstart. I'm just, these are not going to be your raw descriptions. I'll switch these around here. Benchmark, building, building deck, dock, bollard. I've just put a lot of very common descriptions in here, okay? And however, if you don't use this at all, that's perfectly fine. But you may steal some of the blocks from it, or just take a look at how these are predefined, the description key, or the point styles, the layers, all that kind of stuff, and you can reverse engineer yours from this, okay? If you did want to try to use this, maybe you're building, that you record building in the field, maybe it's not BLDG, maybe you just would click on it and say, maybe it's who knows, BD for building or something like that. So you could just put in your own raw description. You could then slide over here. These are just the point styles that are used. You can bring in your own. And then layer wise, I just have them all set up to the national CAD standards. And it's not intended to be everything. It's just a good cross section of what's out there. Some people need tons more, some people need less. Ground shots, everything inside of there. Point styles, any one of these, I put a whole series of different channeling, that kind of thing. But whatever, here's a found hub and tack. If I go inside of that, you'll notice that those key settings, information tab, named, marker, I sized it accordingly, 3D geometry, flattened to 0. Display tab, everything is zeroed out. It gets its layer from the description key file. Point groups are in there set up, but you'll have to tell it what your symbols only are. That's going to be on that's going to be dictated by how you gather your data. Okay. Now, I also, just for what it's worth, I've also included a ton of surface styles. If I look inside these real quick, in both existing and in proposed, similar to the way Autodesk does it. The difference is I've already cleaned them up. So if you go inside any one of them, notice that there's only a handful of layers. Okay. And then I'm going to switch to that slide there. And by the way, I left in alignments too. You can kind of poke through those. I wasn't expecting to show those anyway, but other than what we did there, I left some extra stuff in there. So, you know, you can take a look at that and possibly incorporate that into your environment. So let me pull this last slide up for you, so you can hopefully see that. And if you need that today, email me, like I said, and put in a Jumpstart 1 for the first session. And many of you I'll see next week, or at least you'll hear me next week. I sure wish I was with you, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And I'm just looking at the style, or any questions here. All right, friends, I'm not seeing any questions, but if there is, and you're one that prefers just to, you know, either give me a shout or send me an email. There it is, kclawson@topconsolutions.com. And thank you so much to start your Monday off like this. I couldn't imagine. So I know it's fast and furious, but we're going to follow this up with the documentation. You'll get this template so you can reverse engineer it, and then you also get the video as well. So thank you, friends, and I will talk to you next week. I'm looking here to see if I'm not seeing any other questions. I think we're nothing yet. I tell you what, I'm looking at. It looks to me that Michelle and Josh probably took care of everything. But if there is some particulars, feel free to email me, and we'll go from there. So thank you all so very much for listening in. And next week we'll continue our Jumpstart. Have a great rest of the week.